Children with a hearing loss can learn to listen, to process spoken language and to speak. Auditory-verbal practice promotes the acquisition of spoken language through listening. Children can be educated to use even minimal amounts of amplified residual hearing. The auditory-verbal practice differs from other auditory oral approaches in that it depends highly on parental involvement. It's not a classroom approach, but rather a style of interaction between parent and child, which helps the child to use their hearing as the primary sense in developing spoken language. In auditory-verbal practice, the parents are actively involved in the child's individualised intervention session. The parent ensures that the child takes advantage of current hearing technology in an assertive manner, which results in consistently effective access to soft conversational sound. Parents enrol the child in regular education programs for children with normal hearing to ensure that their child is surrounded by good language models. The role of the auditory-verbal practitioner, therapist, is to provide family-centred or parent-centred intervention rather than child-centred intervention. For it is through guidance, coaching and demonstration that the parents become the primary facilitators of their child's spoken language development. To quote Daniel Lynne, when auditory-verbal practice is carried out with the necessary thoughtfulness, expertise, guidance and love, many children who are deaf or hard of hearing learn to develop exceptional conversational competence.
The principles and techniques of auditory-verbal practice can be used effectively in a school-age setting, particularly in the individual daily session when the focus is on language, listening, speech, pre-literacy and literacy. Listening is still the basis for ongoing language development. Advanced listening techniques at the word, phrase, sentence and paragraph level can increase both speech perception and comprehension. This is foundational to the later comprehension of text. Speech perception testing among school-age population reveals a wide range of skills and abilities. Ongoing auditory development enhances both speech perception and comprehension, particularly in a group dynamic.
An early intervention program that uses auditory-verbal practice supports families to develop spoken language through listening with their child who has a hearing impairment. A key component is the relationship between the parent and caregivers and the auditory-verbal therapist, and also the parent-child interaction. The role of the therapist is to guide and coach parents and caregivers into integrating listening into every part of their child's daily life.
RIDBC Teleschool uses video conferencing to support children with a hearing loss living in rural and remote areas where families may not be able to access local services. Auditory-verbal practice lends itself to video conferencing for a number of reasons. Firstly, families can use video conferencing technology to access the most appropriate services for their child, and they need not be limited to the services available in their local area. Secondly, video conferencing can be used effectively in any location where a high-speed internet connection exists. Thirdly, one of the most critical aspects of auditory-verbal practice is the principle of coaching and guiding the parents. In a video conference setting, the teacher has limited physical access to the child and must provide more explicit guidance so the parents can take the lead for the majority of the session. This allows the parents to quickly develop the skills they need to become the primary facilitators of their child's listening and spoken language development. When a family chooses an auditory-verbal approach and local face-to-face services are not available, video conferencing can be an excellent alternative.
RIDBC Renwick Centre is a centre for research and professional education that is administered by the Royal Institute for Deaf and Blind Children in affiliation with our partners, the University of Newcastle. The Royal Institute for Deaf and Blind Children is Australia's largest non-government provider of special education services and is preeminent among service providers in the areas of early intervention and school-age services for children with hearing loss and their families. The University of Newcastle is recognised nationally and internationally for the quality of its educational programs and for its research.
RIDBC Renwick Centre offers a graduate certificate in auditory-verbal practice for qualified teachers of the deaf, speech-language pathologists, and audiologists. Now, there are 4 courses in this graduate certificate: Fundamentals of Auditory-Verbal Practice, Auditory-Verbal Practice Early Intervention, Auditory-Verbal Practice School-Age Children, and Research and Development in Auditory-Verbal Practice. 2 of those courses are delivered over the internet, and 2 of the courses require a 5-day residential. For students who are enrolled in the graduate certificate, it's important that they're working with families who have a child with a hearing loss, because they're required to submit videotapes for assessment. Now, this graduate certificate is offered in Australia as well as other countries, including Korea and India.